Let's go live to Queen's Park, where Education Minister Stephen Lecce is speaking. Let's listen in live.
Let's remember why we are here. After demanding a nearly 50% increase in compensation, CUPE threatened to strike. Since then, we've been at the table, literally right up to the last minute today. We've made good faith efforts to reach a fair deal. But all along, CUPE refused to take strikes and disruption off the table. For the sake of Ontario's 2 million students, to keep classrooms open, CUPE has left us with no choice but to pass the Keeping Kids in Class Act. It's disappointing that we have to get here. All along, we have hoped to reach an agreement that's right for students, that's right for parents, right for workers, and for taxpayers in this province. But CUPE wouldn't budge. They refused to take a strike off the table. And I just want to take a moment to speak directly to students and parents in this province. You've heard it directly from union leaders that CUPE will strike tomorrow. If they do so, once this legislation is passed, this strike will be illegal. And we will use every tool we have to end their disruption. I know CUPE's strike action will be hard on you. And I'm sorry CUPE is causing you with this anxiety. We believe you deserve better, and our government is doing everything humanly possible to reduce disruption. To start, I've directed school boards to do everything possible to keep as many schools open for as many students as possible. I've also directed the teachers and staff need to be at work tomorrow, providing live learning. As noted, if CUPE moves forward with their strike, we will do everything we can to reduce this unacceptable disruption on children who have been through so much over the past few years. I didn't want to be here. No one wants to be here. But we will never waver from our promise to do whatever it takes to keep kids in class. With that, I'll take your questions.
You underplayed your hand. I mean, really, you say you're going to keep kids in class, but many schools will be closed tomorrow. So you're not being effective. Have you miscalculated with this union?
CUPE has decided to proceed in a strike since Sunday. We brought forth legislation on Monday on the basis that we have to avert a strike.
But it's not working, Minister. There's going to be a strike tomorrow.
There's going to be an illegal strike tomorrow. If they proceed with it, it will be illegal. And as I made clear, we will use every tool at our disposal to ensure there is not disruptions on children.
Haven't you used every tool? I mean, you've used the notwithstanding clause. You've backed them into a corner. They're still defying you. What are you going to do now?
We've been very clear on our expectation. Kids should have been in the classroom tomorrow. They should be in class tomorrow. And we've now passed a law that sets out a requirement that these workers have to get back to work. And it is my hope and expectation they will show up tomorrow for our kids. And as I noted, and I was clear, we will use every tool available in the legislation to ensure kids are in school and disruption is mitigated for millions of children in Ontario.
What happened at the table today, and what were your good faith efforts?
The mediator decided to call off the discussions just in the last few minutes on the basis that we remained far apart. He's asked for confidence of that table. What I can tell you, though, is what the union did not take off the table for discussions was the fact that they intended to strike tomorrow. In fact, potentially strike beyond that.
So negotiations are still going. Is that what you're saying?
No, the mediators called them off, and the government is intent to move forward with the bill because there's no other alternatives. The mediator has suggested that we remain too far apart. The government has been clear we're prepared to negotiate right up to the last minute to avert legislation. But unfortunately, they are not taking strikes off the table. They literally will not commit to removing the threat of a strike. And that is really unfair to so many children. I find it unacceptable that millions of people and their parents have to be home, that they're scrambling for childcare because of a difference fundamentally on higher pay. And I think that's unfair for our kids. And that's why we are made clear on Monday why we're here. Because if we didn't get a deal today, we wouldn't have had legislation that has force with it and powers that try to get the schools back open for the kids we represent.
Minister, are you sure that the federal government won't reserve or disallow Bill 28?
Look, we've been very clear on our intention, using it in a very granular surgical approach with CUPE specifically on the basis that they have committed to a strike. On Sunday, they committed to a strike before there was any use of legislation or inclusion of that provision. They intended to do this 17 days ago when they put themselves on a footing required for a no board. They announced in the summer, before the government even brought forth our first proposal, that they were going to strike. They sought a strike mandate in August.
The federal government, the Prime Minister last night talked to the Premier. He does not like what your government is doing. They have mechanisms that they could use to stop this. Are you sure they are not going to do that?
The Premier made clear to the Prime Minister that we will do what is necessary to ensure kids are in school, that they've been through so much, and the Premier believes that our publicly funded schools should be open for children. They should not be disrupted because of a needless, unacceptable strike.
Are you going to fine
choice, but what about
55,000 members?
We've been very clear that we're going to use every tool at our disposal to get these schools open. You know, it's quite sad that we're in a position that we have to move forward with legislation. We should have had a voluntary deal Sunday when the government moved our offer up, increased wages, maintained the benefits and the sick leave and the job security that most folks in this economy could only dream of. But they said no, they intend to strike, and the government must now move forward with legislation that actually will bring some certainty, some stability to kids who have been through so much.
Minister, the mechanics of that, is that actually possible? Is that feasible to take 55,000 striking workers before the Ontario Labour Relations Board and fine them $4,000? I mean, is that actually feasible on behalf of the government?
We are going to use every tool available to keep our schools open. Yes, and that is the position of the government. We're going to use every tool in the legislation to keep schools open and to get staff to show up to help our kids. They need to be in school, and we will use every tool available to send a clear, unambiguous message. Schools should be open, and there's accountability for breaking the law.
If you take a step back, have you taken stock of the magnitude of what you're about to do here, to use the notwithstanding clause to end an impending school strike or to impose a contract? I mean, this is going to have ramifications for years down the road, and you're essentially signaling to all of us, to all the people watching, that you don't care about Canadians' rights as they are guaranteed in the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which sets us apart from, I don't know, any other country. So have you taken stock of the magnitude of what you're doing here?
I think, you know, I'm very cognizant of the extraordinary difficulty the strikes and the pandemics of the past 3 years have had on children in Ontario. This is not a normal time in society. Kids are in a different place. This is not the 90s under the Ray government when there were local strikes, or the Harris government, or the McGuinty government when there were strikes there too. This is a different time. And I would argue most parents would accept the premise. This is an unprecedented challenge on children. And they're seeing the regression in their children's social, emotional, physical, and mental health. And on that basis, we feel strongly that we must do everything available to government to give a voice to children. You speak about those rights. I speak about the right of a child to have an ability to have an education, to be supported. I think about the rights of a child when it comes to access to breakfast programs. There are kids that are not going to eat part of our nutrition programs because they rely on schools as a safe place. The most vulnerable kids among us in all of our communities are the ones who will pay the price most disproportionately, and it is for them that the government is acting.
Last question.
Are you going to use the notwithstanding clause again in the negotiations that you have ongoing with ETFO, OSSTF, and the other education unions?
We've been very clear. Our preference is to get a voluntary deal, and we're going to continue to work in good faith with our education unions, as I did 3 years ago when we got a deal with every single teacher union in the province of Ontario. I seek to do that again, a deal that is good for workers, but a deal that keeps kids in the classroom. Thank you all.
All right, we've just been listening to Education Minister Stephen Lecce, and it's the news. Of course, parents, caregivers, and families have been dreading the most. It appears, in fact, a strike will indeed go ahead on Friday for the contract talks between CUPE and the province have broken down. The two sides are too far apart. Mediation between CUPE and the province is now over. They cannot come to an agreement, and so the government will go ahead and pass the Keeping Kids in Class Act, which will make a strike illegal.